Okay, so in this tutorial, in class the other day, I showed two things. We looked at deformers and how to use those, and also this idea of, right at the end, I talked about this idea of needing to create part lines in our object. So this idea that there would be machined parts or cuts in it certain ways, and there's lots of different ways to do this. But again, I'm hammering home this point of how do I organize and group objects and control the 3D space with these volumes. And again, it's a complicated, weird way of kind of thinking of a still life. So I have this example when I did it in class, right? And we can see that it has some cuts and some parts in this. So I'm going to do kind of a very simplified version of this to illustrate the concepts towards that. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to turn off the old Redshift render and go to my little example. So I've created very quickly a volume hierarchy here. And oops, let's delete that. We'll create one of those in a second. I've changed the voxel size to 1, and I have a smooth on top. And the cylinder, I have changed the rotational segments to 64 instead of the default 16, right, where it was kind of faceted. So just make it 64, or if that's not going to do, I don't know, 72, smooth it out a little bit more. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is put a deformer. What I would like this to have kind of a barrel look to it, right? So it isn't just a straight shot. So I'm going to go up to the deformer menu. And again, all of our common menus here, the deformers, we start with the bend at the top, and they're all color-coded this bluish purple. And I'm going to choose the, wherever that is hiding from me, bulge. Okay, so I'll take bulge, and I'm going to, so bulge doesn't do anything, none of the deformers do anything, right, unless they're parented in some way, usually just down below the object that they're going to deform. So I have the bulge in there. The other thing too is I want it to fit appropriately across the volume, the surface itself. So I'm going to hit fit to parent so that it will find this is the bounding box volume size of the object. So it's just basically the general size that it takes up. And then if we go ahead and increase the strength on this, we can see that it's working, right? This is kind of great. But again, we have these facets here, 1, 2, 3, 4 sections, right? If you want to look at it that way. And if we look at the cylinder, you can see that the segments or sections is set to 4. So again, we're going to up that count so we get something nice and smooth out of the volume itself. So that's great, right? So first mission accomplished. And again, these deformers, everyone seemed to have a lot of fun messing around with these in class. Depends on where you situate them in the volume itself, right? On the object, like where the deformation happens, right? So you can see that it's deforming out this way. I could position it right. I could get this kind of shape. Like, you know what? I kind of like that shape so much, I'm just going to leave it just like that. So that's a good start. I'm totally down with that. But it's one clean surface, right? And if we were manufacturing this would have shells or parts that would fit together, and then we'd have part lines that are in there. And again, this isn't an industrial design class, but as I like to say often about art and especially special effects and film and animation, the goal is to be a professional liar, is to make someone believe that this is a futuristic technology or a technology of an alien race or whatever. Like, it has that feeling of that. So it has to be grounded in a reality that we're used to, but it can be, it doesn't have to work, right? It doesn't have to actually function, but it has to look like it could. So as a completely smooth surface, that's a cool form, but it doesn't really look like a machined part that we would use one way or the other. Okay, so many different ways to approach this. I'm going to show a very simple one, and I'm just going to create a cube here, and let's just make sure it kind of contains the volume. And oops, I'm just going to move it up on the Y a certain distance. I'm not going to make it perfectly right in the center, but I'll call that good. And then I'm going to duplicate that. And again, I just held down the Command key. So if I click on this object and I hold down Command and click and drag, I get a little plus sign there. I don't know if you can see that little plus sign, right? So I get a second one, and I'll just move this one down so it's just below it. And the whole idea here is I'm creating a volume around the volume. And instead of, obviously if I did union, the box would totally contain that shape. And if I did subtract, it would completely negate it. But if I did intersect, it would show me my crazy object that I had here a second ago, right? It will show me this shape only where it is inside of this shape, right? So I'm going to get one half here, and I'll get another half down here. Now, let me turn off this. The grids drive me crazy. There. But I can't put both of these in there and say intersect and then intersect again, because this section will be gone, and I can't glue these two together because they would glue together and I wouldn't get a clean little part line out of that. I guess you kind of could, but there's a reason why. What I want to do is separate this, and I want to separate the parts so I can put different materials on it. So I guess you could put them in there. I'll maybe demonstrate that one in class, but I also want people to get used to working with multiple volume objects. So what I'm going to do with this is duplicate it. So here's the second one. I'll name this one top. And bottom. Okay. And I'm just going to remember cube, and then cube 1 is the one that's on the lower. And I'm going to hide the bottom section. They're overlapping with each other, so it doesn't matter, but I'm only seeing the top one here. I'm going to fold it so I can see it. I'm going to take the cube and put it into the builder. Now it's going to, you can see as I put it in here, it welds, it starts to weld to it. And if I look inside the builder, it's because it's set to union. The other thing too is it came in above the smooth. I already put a smooth in there. So that looks pretty nice, right? But I don't want smoothing, and I don't want to add this. And I guess I could subtract it, which is a totally fine way to do this. But I'm going to choose intersect, so I just know that this piece, whatever's inside of it, that's what I'm going to see, as opposed to putting this here and subtracting so I get the others. It would be like this to get this, and the other piece that's hidden here to get the other half. So I'm going to use intersect. It's going to help us do several things, right? So I get this part, and let's go back to the other volume, right? That's the other half. And unfold, let's drag and put that cube in there. And again, we'll turn it to intersect. Oops, let me turn that. There we go. Right, so we have the two of those set up. And if I need to, depending on how tight you want that part line to be, right? So that's pretty good. And as you would imagine, I could go on and on. There's lots of different ways I could try to do that. But I have two pieces. I have two different halves. I have this nice section in there. But what if I wanted to make this even a little trickier? I'm going to go back to the cylinder, and I'm going to create one. I'm going to change its orientation so it's along the Z. And I'm going to position this right here as if, I don't know, so some kind of like locking mechanism part. I don't even know. I'm going to change the height segments. Probably don't need to change those, but I'll make it 16. And this one I do. I'm going to make 72 so it's nice and smooth, right? And I'm positioning this, but what I want to do is I want to cut into this so that the top half actually doesn't have this, it gets cut away from it, right? And then I want the bottom half to add this and fit into the part, right? So I want to subtract up here and add down here. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, let's hide. I'm going to hide the lower half, right? So I want this to cut into it, but still leave me with this intersection shape. So let's take the cylinder and let's put it into the builder, right? And again, you can see it kind of automatically does the union, but we don't want that. So what we're doing is we've put this volume around it, right? So we can get a part line. So I get this section, and I just want to cut from that. So there's several ways that I could just, because it's at the top, I could subtract, right? So I get that piece, right? Now, well, I'll come to that in a second. So subtract is going to work fine here. When I do the next one, we might have to use a folder. I can't even remember, actually. I'm doing this on the fly, so we'll see. But this is already an interesting shape, but when I do the next one, I want this to actually get filled in by the bottom piece, right? So let's hide the top, and I'm just clicking once, clicking twice, right? So when the top button is red, it hides it from the viewport. They're still there when I render, but they're not in the editor view. And I'm going to unhide the bottom, right? So I want these to match, so I'm going to use the same cylinder, right? I'm going to take this one and put it in there. And put it in. And I'm going to say union. So I am going to get these, they're now glued together, right, into the, so this, fine. I'm going to unhide the other. Oops. There we go. So I guess this is okay, right? This would be, I mean, it's not like that it's a bad shape, and it's nice that this flows with it. But I actually want this to maintain this surface, right? I don't want this to stick out in this case. Though again, I mean, it's a completely acceptable, but I want to show for demonstration purposes how to use a folder system in here. So this is like layer system in Photoshop, right? So if I look at the builder, down below here, I have the smooth that we've used before, but we also have a folder. So if I just click on that, it's just like a hierarchy, a group, and it only shows up down here. You don't get the representation. So with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the cube inside that folder, and I'm going to put the cylinder inside that folder. And actually, I had it the right way. Okay, so we have two things going on here. You can see that the cube is a base, right, within this hierarchy, with this folder structure, just like cylinder, right? So cylinder, things can only be added, subtracted, or intersected with it. The cube is similar. It's here, and then what do we want to do above that? So right now we have it at union. We could subtract, right? So we get that section, and then we could do intersect, right? So we can get a hole like this with that piece in there, which is kind of what we did before. But what I want to do is union. So I want to add that, right? So I'm going to add these two pieces together so that I get that section. And then wherever that intersection happens between the two pieces, this is where this happens, right? Because this got added to that, the cylinder got added to that top, right, across there. But then the intersection then takes that new shape and says, oh, wherever this one intersects with that. So, right, this is kind of an interesting piece. There's so many different ways you could look at this as well. You could just continue to pile onto that, right? I could take this shape and then maybe subtract inside of that. Maybe I would take the cylinder and I'm going to duplicate that, and I'll make it, I don't know, 15. And that's within the builder itself here, so I'll put it down, and this time we'll subtract again. So I guess part of my point was, how could I continue to use a similar object where it's placed, right? So I have a cylinder here, and then the smaller cylinder inside of it to create this complex shape where I have a part line as if these would fit together. I could do other intersections in other places as well. Maybe I'll do a separate tutorial about a way to think about that. But the other part too is that we've added a folder, right? So that we can create unions and subtractions and things like that to create a new shape, and then use that new total shape once it gets to this level to then do something with it, right? So that's the union side of that, putting those things together. It's not bad, right? But the intersect, right, is just really great because we get this additional part line. Okay, 14 minutes, perfect timing. So Deformers, make sure you parent them. Fit to parent is your friend, but then you can modify that. Again, it's nice because I could come back and change this position, I guess. What was this, 100? Let's make it 50. And because I did it here on this one, I need to do it on that one. Right? Interesting cuts. And then the second thing is just within those builders, making sure that if these are related to each other, if you're making these duplicates, naming would be helpful, right? The intersection cylinder or this intersection cube or something like that. Okay, I'll leave it there.